Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome to episode 39 of the OT is In. Today, we're thrilled to have Carmela Trejo join us for an enriching discussion on using time outdoors to help support your child's fine motor skills, core strength, and overall development. She's a nature-based occupational therapist and a mother of infant twin boys. She has a background in school-based OT as well. Carmela provides invaluable insights on respecting nature during therapy sessions, the importance of accessible, inclusive outdoor spaces. We'll also discuss practical tips for parents to encourage safe and exploratory outdoor play, even in urban environments. So whether it's developing motor skills through fun activities or fostering a child's natural curiosity, this episode is packed with advice and heartfelt stories. So if you're keen on discovering how nature can be a powerful tool in your child's development, tune in and let's explore together. And after the episode is over, go follow Carmela on Instagram at children.ot.nature. Now, on with the show. One of the top reasons that parents reach out to me at Homeschool OT is, help my child with handwriting, or my child is struggling with handwriting and so many people are just telling me to forget it. It's not even necessary. What do I do? We've touched on this in several times on the OT is In podcast. Episodes 5 through 8 discuss the impact of vision on handwriting. Episodes 21 through 24 discuss general strength in handwriting. And now episodes 37 through 39 are talking about the fine motor skills needed for handwriting. And there will be more series on this in the future. But if you, a homeschooling parent, are looking for ways to improve your child's handwriting and can't wait for these future episodes to touch on the topics that pertain specifically to you, look no further than the handwriting focus group. Each week for 4 weeks, there are new videos and written information on the underlying skills needed for handwriting. Information on dysgraphia, curriculums and products to support the actual act of handwriting, and low-tech as well as high-tech assistive technology to support your child's success. Now, I say over 4 weeks, but you do have lifetime access because I totally recognize the busyness of homeschool parents and parents in general. So visit homeschoolot.com today and learn more about the ways to join our handwriting focus group, or visit more specifically homeschoolot.com/handwriting-focus-group. Let's make handwriting fun, easy, and effective together. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. I am so excited to have another nature-based OT. Now that we've done this a few times, in episode 6, we chatted with Kim Wilson about using nature to support vision. And in episode 14, we interviewed my close nearby friend, Caroline Santangelo, about using nature to help develop interoception in kids. And today we're going to talk about nature and fine motor skills with Carmela Trejo. So first, can you just go ahead, Carmela, and tell us a little bit about your journey into nature-based therapy?
Thanks for having me today. And yeah, of course. So, ever since I was little, nature has always been a part of my life. Me and my family grew up in the city and in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, but my mom always made sure that we were either outside playing or out in nature somehow. It
See,
probably
look at
helps.
moms, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I'm one of three. I'm a triplet, so I'm sure it was hard for her.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm sure it was hard for her. I can imagine triplets in a house, so getting outside was something that probably definitely helped that and got our energy out. And with three girls, that'll definitely do that.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so always in a park, always finding a little forest, whether that's a little forest in the city, however you say that, and playing. And ever since then, I've been pulled to nature. So I grew up in a city or a suburb my whole life and then moved to Colorado in 2018. Occupational therapy school was at the University of Minnesota. And nature occupational therapy was never brought up there. I don't know if it was even around back then. I'm sure people had their niches then, but it wasn't talked about in my
Right.
program. And I went into the schools as an occupational therapist, and being in Colorado, knew what was out there in nature and saw most of these kids going to school, getting occupational therapy in school, then maybe going to an ABA program after school and being there until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And the pattern repeat. The nature occupational therapy was pulling me, saying, okay, maybe we can provide something different for these kids when it comes to occupational therapy, give them a different environment. So that's really how that started.
That's beautiful. And so, where is your practice exactly in
I,
Colorado?
yeah, I service Denver and the surrounding areas, about an hour and a half in all areas.
Okay.
So that's where I'm mainly located. And I am willing to travel. And I host weekend groups. I try and keep them in the same area every weekend, whether that's northern Denver, southern Denver, and then east and west, depending on where the parents are.
That's amazing. You
Yeah.
guys, I also think it's important to note that it's 6 a.m. on Eastern Standard Time when we're recording this. And Carmela has woken up and is ready and talking with us at 4 a.m. on her side. And that's because you said you were up anyway because you have twins. Three
Yes.
little ones.
I have twin boys, they're identical boys. They turn one in November, in beginning of November. And
Wow.
yeah, so it runs in the family, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. And so what is it like with them, getting them outside? Is that easy or hard? Or are you looking at your mom like, Mom, how did you do this? Or is this, it's part of your life and you're in it?
It's I as a nature-based occupational therapist, you'd probably think that we'd be taking them hiking and camping at this point, but that's not really that's something that we've done yet because they were preemies and then we had to keep them inside for a while. And just these past couple months when the summer came, I made it a point, my husband made it a point that we take them outside for at least an hour, 2 hours every day. That usually is between that 4 and 6 p.m. time. Now that it's getting darker, we'll push that, make that earlier. And then on the weekends, we usually try and set up at a park or set up at an open area. Not quite hiking yet, going on trails. Some Denver parents will do that and get out there, but we haven't tried that yet, but it's in the future
It's
for
in
sure.
the future. So
Yeah.
what does that look like right now when you're saying you set up at a park? For our listeners who have
Yeah.
little teeny ones, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we bring them in their stroller. I always have a blanket in my car, one of those picnic blankets, and we really lay it on the grass and we have them go on there and we lay on the ground with them and then they explore. They're crawling towards the grass, they're crawling towards leaves, crunching leaves, trying to put things in their mouth, all of that fun stuff. And having them, some babies, I will say it's up to the parents, but some babies don't like grass. Sensory wise, they just don't, they're just not with it. But we've never pushed that on them. We've had them on the blanket and then it's up to them to crawl or to try and explore the area. I would say that's the main thing is don't push too fast. Let them, when they're ready, they'll go explore the grass. They'll go explore those
Yeah.
sensory needs that they need. They'll crawl to where they want to go or roll to where they want to go. And that's all it is right now. No walking yet, just a lot of climbing on mom and dad on the ground, on
Very
a
great.
blanket, in the grass.
See, and that does seem rather simple, although once they
Yeah.
are walking and going in different
Yeah.
directions, it might be
Yeah.
a whole different story. I
That'll be definitely
actually,
so.
I
Yeah.
actually have a picture of my daughter when she was 13 or 14 months old, sitting and lifting up her feet off the grass because she had felt it on her hands, but she'd never on her feet, and she was barefoot, and she was like, ah, lifted them straight up in the air. So I love that you're saying kids will explore, and if they don't like it, they'll figure out a way. It's like, I am not moving. And her feet were just up.
Definitely. They'll tell you for sure.
Tell us a little bit about your therapy mind. When people are thinking about, wait, nature-based therapy, isn't that just like outside playing? What separates going outside to play from nature-based therapy?
It really surrounds the therapeutic goals of the child, I would say. I have some structured activities in my playbook, like scavenger hunts, nature-based crafts, obstacle courses, sensory integration, for example, with mud or with the things in the area. Those are more of the structured activities, but when it comes to the therapeutic goals, are we working on fine motor, which we'll touch on in the future, sensory integration, social skills, executive functioning. It depends on those therapeutic goals for how we start a session out in nature. I do believe in child-led therapy. That doesn't mean there's a misconception. That doesn't mean that the child chooses what they do all the time or that they're in control of the therapy session, but it's more of a coordinated session. So a lot of times the child will start with something and I'll go off of it. And children out in nature tend to do that anyway.
Yeah.
If you ever took a child and put them in nature, they're not waiting for you to tell them what to do. Usually they'll start something or they'll start imagining something or they'll go play with something. And that actually helps with therapy sessions because then you play off of what that child wants to do. But there's also open-ended play. There's free exploration, imaginative play, nature-based role playing. So it really just depends on those therapeutic goals, I would say.
Of
Yeah.
that. And yes, I do want to touch in on fine motor skills. So there are so many things that parents, when they're coming to me and saying, my child isn't writing, or I've been working on this and their grasp on their pencil is bad. And oftentimes I still will recommend nature-based therapy. And we're talking back and forth, and they're like, no, I want them to write. I understand, but there's so much that's going on in therapy sessions that are outdoors. So tell us a little bit about how you do address fine motor skills. But you know what? We might actually need you to define fine motor first. So what would you say, what
Yeah.
are fine motor skills?
It's really simple, just the coordination of the small muscles in your fingers and your hands. The ability to use your hands in specific ways. For example, when we're talking about grasp, pinching, in hand manipulation, can you bring things from the palm of your hand to the outside of your fingers, like people and children would need to control a pencil. Hand-eye coordination is included under fine motor skills and finger dexterity.
And guys, there is a video that I will make sure that I link here on fine motor skills. And when we were talking about in-hand manipulation, what does that actually look like? So there is a video of that that is for sure going to be linked here in the show notes to jump back to. So how do you work on all of these things in nature?
So if first, yeah, when it comes to fine motor skills, if I broke it down like that again, pinching, I could take tongs to a session, we could go around and we can use tongs to work on pinching with the tongs and picking up items in nature. Really depends on the child. Again, that child-led therapy. What do they want to pick up? Or you can't just say, go pick up some blades of grass, go pick up some sticks. No, they're going to say, oh, let's collect this to help with to make our castle grow and with jewels, and it's very imaginative, and that helps in therapy sessions. With in-hand manipulation, we can use that with many things in nature. Rocks, we can make a game out of that. And hand-eye coordination, that comes into play with the scavenger hunt. Children have to focus on a visual in nature and then possibly pick it up with their hands. So a lot of that can be done in nature.
Now, when we're talking about nature-based therapy, and especially with fine motor skills, for our hands to be able to work, we also need a lot more coming through our core. And guys,
Yeah.
there are other episodes about core strength that, again, I will make sure that I link here. But what you're talking about here is making sure that you're using the whole body. At least that's what I'm hearing. And then just with some
That's right.
intentionality to the hands. So, how does nature afford that? And how can you be intentional to move from using your core all the way down to your hands?
I think a lot of that has to do with what you have around you. If you can, when we talk about gross motor, so the whole body and using that core and using your hands, with the obstacle courses that I run, there's specific items that are out there for us. Large rocks, trees to climb, stumps to climb over, stumps to climb under. But I also bring items into therapy sessions too, such as swings, mats, and climbing rocks if it were possibly in a nature-based setting that does not provide that in the area. So I do bring items into therapy sessions as well to facilitate that.
Well, I love that you said that because I think parents are often like, wait, we're supposed to be out in nature. And so we're just going to go and do it. But it's okay to
Yeah.
incorporate other things into your outdoor play.
Definitely. As long as you respect the environment, clean up after yourself, and we do that every time.
You guys, are you tired of battling with handwriting frustrations while trying to get your child to focus on math? This blend of handwriting and math was one of the reasons my son struggled for several years. Then we started CTC Math, the math program designed to make learning accessible without the need for endless writing. With CTC Math, your child can work through interactive lessons and quizzes right on the app or computer. No more scribbling down answers or trying to keep up with the long worksheets or trying to even keep columns lined up for those long addition or long division problems. And the automated grading gives you immediate feedback on how they're doing. And the best part? Everything is digital. From lessons to assessments, CTC Math eliminates the struggle of handwriting so your child can focus on mastering math concepts at their own pace. So visit ctcmath.com today to start your free trial and give your child the freedom to focus on learning and not just on writing. That's right, that's ctcmath.com. It's math made simple, accessible, and fun for every learner. Now, back to the show. So you mentioned that you grew up in the city and doing a lot of obviously being outside as well. But now in Colorado, at least in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's super easy. Colorado is made for nature. But what would you say about these families that do live in, the suburbs and in, the cities? How can we be more intentional about activities outdoors?
I think a lot of things that you can find now are local museums, local science centers, like here in Denver, are actually bringing ways to the community for people to be outdoors more. An example that I have for you is the Denver Science Museum here has just opened, I believe, and correct me, viewers, if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a 30-acre play area. It's open to the public. You don't have to go to the Denver Nature Museum to access it, but it's a 30-acre play area, or maybe three.
Wow.
You check me on that one. But if I had a Google fact checker. But and it's open to the public and it's exploration play. So you go, and I checked it out, and you go and there's different areas, there's different things to read about the area, and it's really great. It's a way to get kids out. There's, you know, things like the zoo, typical things that you can go to, but free,
Yeah.
trails, parks. Denver and in Colorado in general is really nice. Something that I noticed was different compared to when I went to school at the University of Minnesota in Minnesota is that I feel like there's way more parks. Every neighborhood has a park or more than one park. So I think they did really good trying to have that accessible to kids. And now I don't know if it's as accessible to all kids, unfortunately, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
I was just at an event last weekend in Colorado Springs that Kiva, a speech pathologist down there, put together. And she helped Castle Rock, halfway between Denver and Colorado Springs. And she was one of the main people to help bring an inclusive park to that area so all kids could join. That's been really great. So I think there's people in the community that's making sure that happens as well. But just getting out into your local trails, state parks. You can pay $29 extra a month for your license plate to get into any state park in Colorado
Look
throughout
at
the
that.
year. Yeah, so we do that every year, and you don't have to pay that $10 fee or whatever it is
Yeah.
every time you enter a state park. All of those things can be intentional. And if $29 can be a lot for people, trails are free. Parks are
Right.
free. It's important to try and get your children out there. I think specifically for people who bring their kids to school, they don't have a lot of outside time.
Mhm.
Recess is 10 to 12 minutes a day, and that sometimes can include a teacher reprimanding a child in the hallway or having to get kids back to school, back into the class to keep learning. And that time is limited.
Right.
And as a school-based I've also seen specials changing. So gym and music and all of that, it's not as hands-on anymore. It's a lot of following protocol and teaching at the kids now instead of actually them participating as much as I remember as a kid being in gym
Right.
class. Just so if parents could be aware that children are not getting as much outside time as they should and access that when they can, whether that's on the weeknights or the weekends.
Fantastic. And you mentioned inclusive parks. So,
Yeah.
what exactly does that look like? What separates out an inclusive park versus a regular
Yeah.
park?
So if you go to a regular park, you'll see the typical setup, slide with stairs that you need to access, a swing that you need to access and have mobility in your legs. If we think of children in wheelchairs, how are they going to use that? Unless the parent has the strength and ability and the child wants them and is okay with them picking them up, bringing them on the play equipment. Well, in Castle Rock, they have inclusive swings where you can pull up a wheelchair into the swing, which is really
So great.
nice. They have slopes rather than stairs to get to the slide. So if children do have some mobility issues, they don't necessarily have to use that one step, two step with their feet, which a lot of kids do have problems with that
With that
even
motor
now.
planning piece. Hmm.
Yeah, so I would say that's more inclusive for sure. They have swings where they go back and forth in it's a big circle and it's attached by a rope where you can place your child on there and hold them if you want to keep them stable. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone sitting in the swing. So a lot of that inclusive I think is important. Yeah.
Yeah, and before I went to OT school, I was a recreation therapist and in Richmond, Virginia, and there's a garden outside. It's the Lewis Ginter Gardens, and I worked at Children's Hospital in Richmond then, and we worked as advisors to help to build the same type of inclusive playground. This was all the way back in 2000. So they're popping up here and there. And even how you mentioned it is difficult sometimes to get upstairs, but think about how motivating that is at a playground versus up and down the stairs, the four wooden stairs that we have in a therapy gym, or even at home sometimes where that gets redundant, but in a
Yes,
new environment, how that can help to allow the kids to be themselves and to get out and to play. And oh, I love that so much.
definitely.
Let's hop back into fine motor skills for a second since we went on a tangent, which I love, but
Mhm.
back into some fine motor skills. So if there are parents here who are thinking, all right, so maybe you've convinced me a little that sure, we do need to be working on handwriting at home, but
Yeah.
there are other ways to be working on building these handwriting skills without actually writing. So,
Yes.
what are some activity ideas that parents can use in their everyday life to help that handwriting without actually writing?
Yeah, so when I think handwriting, it's so important to state that there's so many skills that need to come before handwriting. I've seen people try and put a pen or a pencil or a marker in a child's hands starting at 2 and having them trace letters at 2 and 3. And that's just not appropriate from an OT standpoint. So those skills that we do want to build is when it comes to handwriting is hand strength, the hand-eye coordination, all of that needs to be stable before we can even start handwriting with letters or tracing. Some activities that would help with that is some outdoor nature activities that you could even bring into the home or to the backyard, or you can have children, instead of tracing their hand, you can have them trace objects from outside, have them bring in leaves and trace. That has to do with motor coordination and visual scanning. You can have kids find items, like I said, that scavenger hunt in the backyard, anything you want, doesn't have to be nature, it can be things in the home even,
Yeah.
where you can work on visual scanning. That also works on attention because kids need attention when in order to work on handwriting. Kids need memory. We need to work on cognition before they can go to handwriting because how else will they remember the letters and the formation of the letters? So you can work on activities of having them remember names of plants, names of flowers,
Love
names of
that.
trees in your area. So not only do they work on handwriting skills with the memory and the attention and the cognition, but they're learning about their surroundings, which can be utilized throughout their entire life. Those are some main things I would say. When I talked about tongs earlier, tongs are a great activity for kids to use, and you can adapt in the ways that a child can use tongs. There's all different types of tongs out there now, but you can use those to pick up items out in nature and collect them throughout your yard. Uh, I am a big fan of this might not be nature based, but you can make it. I'm a big fan of vertical coloring or
Yes.
coloring underneath the table because that builds the shoulder strength, it builds the hand strength. It helps with the way that the hand holds the marker or the crayon for the grasp. So I'm a big fan of that. I always tell
Yeah, we
parents
found
that.
it was a blow up easel several
Yeah.
years ago when my kids were little, and I had that outside. I'll make sure I link a picture of that too. We just found it at Michael's, but
Yes.
he would draw and color all over that outside with primarily with his hands, and he would put mud on there and it was sliding down, and then he
Yeah.
would write inside the mud, or he would take a hose that he's squeezing and it was going at the giant easel. And so then I would give him watercolor paint that he could put on it, and it would wash right off. And oh, that was one of our most favorite outdoor writing kind of activities for
Yeah.
him.
It sounds amazing. It sounds perfect for
Yeah, I
the
wonder if they still have that. If they
I
do,
want
I'll make sure I link that
it.
here too. I'll look for one on Amazon or
Yeah, I
something.
need that for the boys for sure.
It did pop eventually, so that
Yeah.
it didn't last for forever, but
Yeah.
as most outdoor things do. One other thing that you mentioned earlier when you were talking about climbing and stuff outdoors, and then you
Yeah.
also talked about trying to leave nature the way it is. I've had a parent who came and talked to me, and actually we went through this with my older son, who is quite the sensory seeker, where in public areas, he wants to climb trees, he wants to be
Hmm.
all over. And there are some places where you can do that,
Yeah.
some places where you have to stay on a path, and that can actually make it harder for
Yeah.
some of our kids who are seekers. So tell me, how do you work through some of these rules of nature with your kids during nature-based therapy sessions?
Yeah, I always try to reiterate before therapy sessions the rules of nature, of how what I would say the rules of nature are. Where I mentioned before, we want to respect the property that we're on. We want to respect nature. Everything is growing here for a reason and helping our ecosystem. So that I tend to reiterate that in the beginning, and usually kids are okay and they're following it. But like you said, we do have some of those sensory seekers. I don't tend to go to places where kids won't be able to be free to be themselves and
Good.
climb,
Yeah.
and but there are trails out there where in Colorado where they say stay on the path. There's signs that say do not go onto this property, it's private property, or this
Mhm.
property is protected, or this property is a wetland, it's protected. So I tend to not go to those areas. And most of the kids are very respectful of the areas, and we don't they always be surprised. They're always picking up after themselves. They're never leaving any type of
But
craft
yeah.
material on the ground. It's just amazing. I think that once we go over that in the beginning of sessions, and they tend to remember that they know, because I'm not sure if that's always reiterated in a school setting or other settings.
Mhm.
And when they're hearing it from an adult and from someone such as a therapist, I think they really tend to follow those cues and respect nature. Yeah.
Fantastic. And on the flip side of that, there
Yeah.
are parents who are not as exposed to being out in nature, and there's a continuous be careful or feeling scared. What can you say to parents to help to ease that a little bit?
Yeah, I always let parents know that we were all kids at one point, and it depends on your parent, but I was out with my sisters and the kids in the neighborhood until dark, and then when in the summertime mainly, and then when it was dark, we came inside. We were given that freedom to explore, hurt our foot, hurt our knee,
Yeah.
fall off a scooter, all of that. And yeah, like you said, now I think a lot of parents are worried about their children getting hurt. There is an increase of use of social media, seeing kids have TBIs from falling off a bike, or which is
Mhm.
it's very good to see that we need to protect our heads and be careful with everyday activities. But I try and replace those words. Instead of be careful, I'll say, okay, I'll guide the child. Okay, what are you going to do from here if they seem stuck?
Yes.
Where are you going to put your feet from here? Or, okay, if they can get a little rough with the items in the area. Okay, let's use safe hands, careful hands, things like that. Just changing the verbiage just a little bit can make the child feel free to keep exploring and not have to worry, okay, are they concerned about me? Am I going to fall? Or
Right.
internalize that, because a lot of our nature exploration, especially the gross motor and sensory seeking, is climbing.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, okay, we did this a long time ago to hunters and gatherers to collect food and to
Right.
hide food from animals. And this is what we were meant to do. And slowly we've gone away from that and into cars and bikes and sitting a lot.
Right.
So as much as they can get their kids out in nature and let them explore and start easing those anxieties a little bit, by providing them with that verbiage, okay, and helping them guide them, then I think that would make it a much better experience for both the child and for the parent.
I love the
Yeah.
question asking because that even encourages the motor planning where we need to
Yeah.
stop and come up with the idea, and then you can activate and then reevaluate. Was that a good spot to put my foot?
Yeah.
No. Or yes, I'm climbing up and climbing back down. But if we just use those questions to encourage that rather than be careful, because that's not even really helpful.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't mean much. So you have to remember that guide the child, help them feel safe, and also help them feel free to keep exploring. Definitely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, for chatting with us all about different ways that we could use our hands and our bodies in nature and still respect nature. And you should go take a nap.
I'm probably gonna go back to bed for a couple hours.
Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you, Sarah,
you
for
so
having
much
me.
for being here.
Thank you.